Understanding Sweden, Episode 6. Nobody sets your salary here. There's one question that different countries answer in very different ways, and the answer shapes your whole working life. Who sets wages? In some places, the state does. In others, the employer decides whatever it wants. In Sweden, it's neither, and we'll get to that in part 2. Let's start with the map. The labor market is divided into two sectors, the public sector and the private sector. The public sector is everything the state, the regions, and the municipalities are responsible for, and it's paid for with taxes. That includes medical staff, teachers, preschool teachers, police officers, and firefighters. About 30% of everyone working in Sweden works in the public sector. The private sector is all the private companies, and that's about 70% of the workforce. Everything owned by private owners, shops, restaurants, factories, construction firms, and companies working with legal, financial, and transport services. Notice the proportion. Almost 3/4 of people work in the private sector, but the services we all use every day, school, hospital, police, come from that 1/3 that lives on taxes. The labor market also looks different depending on where you are, and here we come back to the first episode, to the ice and the ore. In the big cities, there are lots of companies in many different industries, above all in services and trade. In small towns and villages, you're more likely to find industry, steelworks, paper mills, factories built close to the natural resources they need. So the geography of work in Sweden still follows the geography of resources. The factory stands where the forest and the ore are, not where the view is nice. Let's remember this from this part. The public sector, the state, the regions, and the municipalities, paid for with taxes, around 30% of workers. The private sector, private companies, around 70%.
There are two sides to the labor market. Employers, the people who hire and pay the wages, and employees, the people who do the work. Both sides have organized themselves, each with their own organizations to look after their own interests. On the employer's side, these are the biggest organizations: the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise for private companies, and for public sector jobs, the Government Employers Agency and the Organization for Sweden's Municipalities and Regions. On the employees' side stand the trade unions. There are three big central confederations: the Swedish Trade Union Confederation, usually shortened to LO, the Confederation of Salaried Employees, TCO, and the Confederation for People with a University Education, SACO. Inside each central confederation, there are many separate unions. The members are the people who work at a company, not the companies, the people. So what do unions actually do? They work to make things better for employees. They negotiate wages with the employer, and they can help a member who runs into problems at work. That last one is worth underlining. Help when you have a problem isn't a favor. It's part of what your membership fee pays for. And now, the key mechanism of this whole chapter. The unions and the employers' organizations negotiate with each other, and they sign what are called collective agreements about pay and working conditions. An agreement like that applies to everyone working at the companies it covers. Everyone, not just union members. Which brings us to a sentence worth learning word for word, because it explains this country better than almost anything else. In Sweden, wages are set by negotiations between the two sides of the labor market, not by the state. And that leads to something newcomers usually don't expect. A Swedish worker's strength is collective, not personal. A one-on-one conversation about your salary is more the exception here than the rule. And someone who goes in to argue with the boss alone usually doesn't lose to the boss. They lose because they're standing outside the machinery. Let's remember, on the employer's side, the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise, the Government Employers Agency, and the Organization for Municipalities and Regions. On the employee's side, LO, TCO, and SACO. A collective agreement covers everyone at the workplace, and wages are set by negotiation between the two sides, not by the state.
Negotiations don't cover everything. Underneath them, there's a layer of laws, and that layer is the same for everyone. Labor market laws exist to protect workers' rights and to make the workplace safe. There are laws about working hours, about the work environment, about holiday leave. None of this is up for bargaining. You don't negotiate your holiday, you're entitled to it. On top of wages, an employer has to pay contributions to the state for their employees' pension and sickness insurance. So part of what a worker costs doesn't go into their hands, it goes into their future. And it goes there whether anyone likes it or not. Then there's tax. Everyone who works pays tax on their pay. How much depends on how much you earn. And there's one line the textbook states without softening it. Working without paying tax is illegal. It's worth understanding why that's put so bluntly. Working without tax looks like a good deal, right up until you get sick, or lose your job, or reach retirement. Everything described in this chapter, and in the chapter on the welfare state, is attached to income that's been reported. Undeclared work isn't just a rule broken. It cuts a person out of every insurance at once. And one of those insurances covers losing your job. Unemployment insurance gives an unemployed person an income. The Unemployment Fund is an economic association that pays money to its members when they're out of work. There are two conditions for getting that money, and both are checked. You need to have worked enough hours over a certain period, and you need to be actively looking for work. The whole thing is funded by the state and by the members' own fees. Let's remember this from this part. Laws regulate working hours, the work environment, and holiday leave. The employer pays contributions for pension and sickness insurance. Tax on your pay is compulsory, and working without tax is illegal. To get money from the unemployment fund, you need the hours worked and an active search for a job. The last part is about what happens to that money once it arrives. Personal economy means a person's income and expenses. Income is your salary or your benefits. Expenses are housing, food, clothes. Salaries in Sweden are fairly high compared to many other countries. What they depend on: your profession, your education, your experience, and the industry you work in. On top of that, the state pays out money through social insurance, a pension, for example, or sick pay or child benefit. You can save money too, in a bank account, in funds, or in shares. And many people take out a loan from the bank to buy a home or a car. And here the textbook says something that explains conversations in every Swedish kitchen. Over the last few decades, housing prices in many parts of Sweden have risen sharply. So a home loan is often the biggest piece of a person's economy. Not one expense among many, the whole structure it's built on. First the payment for the home, then everything else. Something else is common too, buying things on credit, with a credit card, for instance. But the interest on that kind of credit is often high. The difference between a home loan and a credit card isn't the debt itself. It's what the debt costs you. If debts don't get paid, an authority steps in, the enforcement authority. It's a government body that makes sure debts are paid, but it has a second job, and fewer people know about that one. It can help someone with heavy debts get their finances back in order. That's called debt restructuring. So the state that collects from you is also the state that pulls you out. It's the same logic you see across the whole Swedish system. First the rule, then the hand. And one last thing, once a year.
Everyone who's had an income during the year has to declare it to the tax agency. Let's pull the series together. Salaries here aren't handed down. They're negotiated by two organized sides. And the collective agreement covers everyone at the workplace. Underneath that sit the laws that aren't up for discussion: working hours, the work environment, holiday. Below that, the insurance systems, all attached to income that's been reported, which is why working off the books cuts you off from every one of them. And at the very bottom stands the enforcement authority, demanding payment with one hand and helping you climb out with the other. There's a practical conclusion here that the textbook doesn't spell out, but it runs through every line of it. In this country, almost everything that protects a worker doesn't switch on by itself. The union, you apply. The unemployment fund, you join and you work the hours. Debt restructuring, you ask for it. The system is ready, but it's waiting for us to take the step. Let's remember, income is salary and benefits. Expenses are housing, food, clothes. Social insurance includes a pension, sick pay, and child benefit. A home loan is the biggest part of a person's economy, and interest on credit cards is high. The enforcement authority makes sure debts are paid and also carries out debt restructuring. And everyone who had an income has to declare it. That was the course Understanding Sweden. The material comes from the official Citizenship-Test textbook. Nothing added, nothing left out.